Hey there folks, Dave from the Jukebox here with another quick album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Magdalena record, Imaginal Disc. Imaginal Disc, the latest studio album from Mica and Matthew Lewin, the duo behind Magdalena, a project that has been responsible for some of the most critically acclaimed underground alternative pop albums, whatever you would really like to consider them at this point, as they've continued blossoming into popularity over the course of the past couple of years, especially their first full-length LP, 2021's Mercurial World, a truly phenomenal album and arguably one of the best debut albums we've gotten from any musical project in this decade so far, and honestly, I would even argue one of the best psychedelia-oriented pop albums of the past handful of years. But even then, I do think that the mini-mix volumes 1 through 3 are extremely underrated, volume 3 being easily one of the best shorter projects of 2023, and now here we are with their proper sophomore full-length studio album, Imaginal Disc, and while I do think that it is a very good record, downright great in quite a few moments, it doesn't necessarily click with me as hard as some of their past releases have, unfortunately. Okay, before I'm crucified for saying that I think this album is being a little bit overrated immediately upon release, let me just say I do genuinely really like a lot of songs here. There's a lot of qualities about this record I like. First and foremost, the production on this record is absolutely phenomenal, and that's not even really all that shocking to say about any Magdalena record at this point. That's a pretty consistent truth about the quality of production that has been throughout their discography since day one, for the most part at least, but nonetheless, the gorgeous, lush instrumentation that is featured here on Imaginal Disc, despite being a common occurrence for them at this point, is still lovely to see. I'm never going to complain about a band doing some great work behind the scenes to make their own sound be good. I can't really complain about that in any capacity, even if I do feel like it's maybe a bit one note at times. And even with that in mind, I can't help but feel that this does heavily benefit some of the more dramatic songs tonally here, like Death and Romance and Watching TV, for example. Some major highlights on this album in my eyes, songs that really stand out as Magdalena doing their best. And I also think that Tenenbaum's vocal work here is as phenomenal as ever. Again, a quality about this duo that has always been pretty present throughout their work, but nonetheless, the omnipresence of her fantastic vocal work does not take away from Imaginal Disc and her work as a vocalist on this record. Mica is still a phenomenal vocalist, and nothing can take that away from her, as she continues to prove it here on her project's latest studio album. Now, while Tenenbaum and Lewin may produce some great sounds here in terms of production, in terms of vocal work, in terms of instrumentation, there's some songs here that I feel like are maybe a little bit lesser. Tracks like Love Is Everything and the following track, That's My Floor, for example, just don't feel as distinct and memorable to me. They feel sort of like filler songs almost. Not that they were intended to be or anything like that, but they just don't quite stack up to the most exciting moments on this record, and I consistently find myself wishing that maybe at times the album leaned a bit more into the psychedelic side of its neo-psychedelic influences. It's great that this album can pull off a very interesting, modernized style of synth pop as well as it does, but I kind of just find myself wishing I was listening to other Magdalena records at that point. And while there's nothing wrong with this record not necessarily stacking up against previous records from the duo, I do feel like things would have maybe been a little bit better off if they had gone in a different direction stylistically, going into a denser wall of sound kind of style that you do occasionally get from them with their psychedelic electronic influences. I just feel like there's a solid chunk of this record that is perfectly fine and perfectly expected from Magdalena but at the same time could have been downright outstanding if it had provided something entirely new for them. And of course there are new, fresh ideas being presented on this record, it's just that they don't come extremely frequently, and it kind of feels like it's more often than not a record that combines a lot of previous influences that have been worked with by the duo in the past into an album that almost kind of feels like a lesser example of what they are capable of. Obviously, their discography is so small and consistent at this point that saying that does not imply this is a bad record, but nonetheless, this does feel like a weaker project in their discography, despite the fact that it is good. I mean, even if the choruses and the different hooks don't grab me as much as they did on previous records, even if I wish the production had maybe gone in a slightly different direction compared to other Magdalena records, Imaginal Disc still has a lot of of great material on it, and while it does have its weaker moments, I would say that the vast majority of the album stands in good territory, with a few select tracks managing to achieve genuine greatness and ranking among some of the best Magdalena Bay material that we've gotten to date. But as a whole, as a full-length listening experience, I think that this record, Imaginal Disc, is genuinely good, but never truly great in terms of connecting everything together to make for a consistently fantastic listening experience. But even with that in mind, this album is honestly most bands' best album, so the fact that I can confidently call this the worst thing that Magdalena Bay have put out to date, except maybe for the first mixtape or so that they put out, that's kind of impressive, because this is still good. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. And with that being said, that is the end of this album review. Thanks for watching The Infinite Jukebox, and I'll see you in the next one.